Colin, thank you for joining us today, and we appreciate you jumping on, taking some time out of your day. And it's great just to be able to see you and talk to you about this topic, which we're going to be looking at today, coping in the coronavirus, which is what our theme is today, and all that comes with that, and particularly maybe the anxieties that come with that. And so we appreciate your time doing that. Maybe tell other people who you are and what you do and different things like that, Colin, just at the beginning here.
Yeah, no, thanks, David. I'm Colin Cooper, and I work with the Association of Baptist Churches in Ireland. My role now really is, suppose, supporting pastors, supporting churches in various aspects. And I suppose alongside that, one of the other things that I'm involved in is the whole area of counselling. I've done some training in that area, and I'd see people from time to time are struggling with anxiety, depression, and self-harm, thoughts of suicide as well. And so, yeah, there's and obviously there's other things in around that too.
Right, well, Colin, we're going to put 10 minutes on the clock here then. So we'll put 10 minutes on the clock here, and then we're going to get straight into this conversation. We're in a place and a time and a season, maybe uncharted territory, I suppose we could call it. And we've been almost forced, I suppose, into this new season. One day everything was what we knew as normal, now it's not. And with that comes a lot of uncertainties and anxieties, and people experiencing anxiety maybe they haven't before. Those who had anxiety, maybe it's heightened for them at this current point. And so we want to talk into that, and we want to ask you about how we deal with that. We talk about practical ways in which we can do that and spiritual ways we can do that. So, Colin, I mean, give us your thoughts about what's going on at the moment and how we navigate this and different thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for all of us, I mean, our whole sort of lifestyle, our whole routine has changed, and with change, there's always uncertainty, only fear, and therefore sometimes anxiety alongside that as well. And so I think it's just that I suppose getting used to a new routine and yet knowing it's not going to be here forever is difficult. You know, I think we are creatures of habit to some extent. I think all of us say we hate routine, but we need routine. I think that's one of the big parts of the problem for a lot of people. And then I suppose on top of that, then, I mean, when you add in some of the other stress factors, you know, shutting at home, not being able to go out and do things we used to do, maybe people with no jobs now, that basically spend a lot of their day working, and work was a big part of their life, and now that's been taken away from them. On top of that, then maybe some financial stresses that come with that, and the uncertainty of the future. What's going to happen when we do open up again? You know, will there be a job for me? Will there be work for me? And then when you add all those financial stresses together, and there's a question over whether you know making payments and paying bills and so on. I mean, all of that just feeds in, and I mean, in one sense, I mean that's a huge stress for so many people.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. So we're experiencing various people are experiencing in different ways. But I mean, financial, you've got that element. You've got the vocational, the marital, the relational changes to normality. I mean, we probably were comfortable in the norm. That's what we were saying in before. Although we talk about routines and how strange how they change so often, and we're now in a period of change in our routines. We don't know maybe what our new routines are, and there's future uncertainties. So yeah, I mean, there's all that to carry, isn't there, at this present time?
Yeah,
that's huge, isn't it?
I suppose I haven't even mentioned the virus itself. I mean, there's obviously a fear of catching the virus and potential death. That's part of that, which is it's probably maybe the biggest of all, really.
Yeah, I think the health issue within all that's going on around us is a huge thing, especially when it's right on our front door. Some people are experiencing it firsthand with family members and friends and loved ones. So yeah, that's an added anxiety on top of all that is currently going on as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well then, Colin, I suppose the question is then, as this all comes in and presses in against us, I mean, what do we do practically? I suppose let's try and break this up. Maybe I'll ask this question: what do we do practically to ease anxiety during the season?
Yeah. I suppose maybe it's also important to say, before I really answer that, actually for some people, some of the anxiety has been lifted as well. I think it's important to mention that. I know a number of folk that I've spoke to and even counsellors that I'm friendly with have shared with me that some of the people they've been working with, actually some of the stress has been removed. So if the stress has been in the workplace or stress has been in school, for example, some of that's been removed for some people. And that, for them then means that they're not maybe so worried about now, but actually worried about what happens next when they go back into it all again.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Some of the practical things, just even around this to ease some of the stress and the anxiety, which is important to understand why we have anxiety and stress. And it is a normal part of being who we are. It's how we're made. It's how God made us ultimately. And actually, anxiety and stress are there for our protection and to help us deal with difficult situations. And so what happens in a stress situation, or when anxiety kicks in, basically, rather than thinking sort of with what they call the prefrontal cortex, the front of our brain, we tend to think of the back part of our brain, the amygdala at the back here. And sometimes we talk about the fight, flight and freeze reaction that takes place in stress, which is a reaction to danger. And it's there to protect us. And I often say to people who are struggling with anxiety and stress, actually, a good place to start is to remember that anxiety is your friend. It's not your enemy. It's there to protect you. Now, however, in saying that, what happens so often is that it takes over and it starts to control us. So rather than us controlling the anxiety, it controls us instead. And then that begins to change things.
Yeah.
And so in a very practical way, understanding that what happens with anxiety is we move from the sort of the prefrontal to the amygdala. One of the ways back to engage the prefrontal again is to talk to someone. Simple as that. So what we're doing is we're moving away from that stress reaction back to a logical conversation.
Yeah.
With someone.
Simple as that, isn't it? Is maybe just pick up a phone at the moment, or contacting someone professionally and stuff like that. Is that what you would say, Colin, this time?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a counsellor. If you need to talk to a counsellor, I mean, a lot of them are still operating over the phone or over Zoom. But it can also be a sort of a family friend or somebody in the church that you know. And I think also too, I mean, a couple of other things alongside that is knowing yourself. So if you struggled with anxiety in the past, remember your routine has changed now. So know what works for you in the past. Okay, you might have to just take a moment to think that through and even write it down. Sometimes it's helpful to write down what's worked well in the past for your anxiety, and try to find a way of doing those things again. Find that new routine. I mean, routine is important. I mean, your bedtime routine, your sleeping patterns, your eating the sort of a healthy diet and so on. All of those very practical things are really important. And getting a good routine that sometimes, because we're in lockdown, goes out of the window altogether. So it's important to just find that new routine that's going to be helpful for you again.
Yeah, no, I think I've even heard that, and even for us here in the Kimber household, we've definitely experienced that our routine has changed, and we're all in the house together. We have a 2-year-old who doesn't go to bed now when she normally went to bed. The days are longer, so there's all of this that comes in. We're probably trying to establish a new routine,
Yeah, and I mean it's important. I mean, routine's an important part of life. I think on top of that too, I mean, I suppose take it a stage further, I mean, even to face some of those fears and some of the anxiety. Sometimes, I mean, one of the worst things for anxiety is to run away from it, but actually when you begin to face it, it helps. So, I mean, if you become fearful, for example, a very simple example of going outside, engaging with people, mean, go for a walk. Obviously keep your safe distance and so on, but go for the walk. I mean, don't stop going out. Take your half an hour walk a day, or whatever you want. It's important to face it, and even with financial stuff. I mean, there's a lot of financial pressure and so on. Obviously, there mightn't be a lot of things you can do at the moment, but actually begin to plan the best you can to work through it. It is helpful. Begin to get your brain to think about it. Is helpful, rather than sort of simply worrying and sort of trying to put it to one side. Somebody's talking to the people who can support you, people who know about business from a very practical way. Get as much information as possible at this moment. It can be helpful in that sense. Trying to face some of those fears, and even around the financial, is useful as well.
No, that's really helpful. That's really helpful. Well then, Colin, the time is moving on quick. We call this a 10-minute Tuesday, so we want to move on, try and get as much in these 10 minutes as we can. So, I mean, there's quite a few practical things you've given us. I'm sure there's a whole load of other ways in which we can put things in place practically to help. And maybe we need to follow up with this at some point in the future. But let's turn then, just for the next few minutes, then to the second question, which is this for me. As Christians, so for those of us who believe in Jesus, have known what it is for our sins to be forgiven, and we've committed our life to Him, we live as Christians. We have this spiritual realm which is almost in tandem with this the practical, but it's a different level altogether. So for the believer listening, what does the Bible say, I suppose, is the question about anxiety, and what do we do with that? I mean, that's a huge question to answer in a few minutes, but I mean, can you help us there?
Yeah, I suppose it was important to say, I mean, when we look at ourselves, I mean, as you said there, I mean, we're made up of the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual, and all of that, all those three overlap. And so, I mean, we can't ignore one without the other. If one's off, everything feels off. And so, I mean, the spiritual is an important part of this whole answer. And I suppose, again, what I said earlier, I mean, God made us with this capacity, for protection and for safety, and anxiety is part of that. And as you go through the Bible, you discover that the Bible talks about that. I mean, Psalm 69, verse 29, David talks about being in pain and being afflicted. It's part and parcel of being a human being, if you want to put it that way. I mean, even you think of Jesus before he goes to the cross in the Garden of Gethsemane. I mean, Luke 22:44, he's anxious. In fact, we read there he sweats great drops of blood, which is severe anxiety. And so, I mean, it's part and parcel of being who we are, how God made us. It's a reaction to danger. It's a fear reaction. It's an anxious reaction. And so we've got to put that in context, that there's legitimate fear and anxiety that we can't get away from in one sense. It's part and parcel of life. We're always going to face some anxiety. I mean, Jesus in Matthew 11:29, I mean, he urges us, to take his burden upon him, and to place his burden upon him. His burden is easy and light. And I mean, as you work your way, you have this reassurance from God, and then I suppose on top of all of that, I mean, one of the things, I suppose, going back to the counselling again, I mean, the whole area of CBT, the cognitive behaviour therapy, is the whole idea of challenging your thoughts. So you encourage people to move from a negative thought to a factual or a true thought. Everybody always says, think positively. And I always say to people, don't think positively, think factually, think truth. And that, of course, to me, fits in so well with what the Bible teaches. I mean, Romans 12:2, don't be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. This idea of our mind being renewed. Or Philippians 4, verse 8, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, You know, I mean, those are things you think upon. Think upon those things. I suppose one of the people I go to so often when it comes to that is Job. And the reason Job is so helpful is because he was facing, you know, serious problems in his life. I mean, he lost his family, he lost his health. There were so many issues and struggles in his life. You look at him, you see him questioning God, you see him doubting, you see him wrestling through all of this. It's real. You see his pain in the middle of it all. You see his anxiety in the middle of it all, and his fear. And yet ultimately he comes to the truth that God is on the throne, that God is sovereign. And yet, as I say, I don't say that flippantly, because it takes him time to get there. He doesn't just arrive there. He has got to work process and work through it before God and with the help of other people around him. And so it's okay to struggle. It's okay to wrestle with these things. It's okay to have doubts sometimes in the middle of all of these things. And yet in the middle of all of that, we go back to truth. And we land on truth, that God is still on the throne. Jesus Christ is still Saviour. That he's the risen Saviour. He died and he rose again from the dead. He's the resurrected Saviour. He's powerful. He's able to save and to keep us for all of eternity. And sometimes it's that eternal perspective that matters, because actually when all is said and done, everything else in this world will fade. But what is eternal lasts. And sometimes in the middle of all of this, we have got to go to what lasts, the eternal truths of who God is and who Jesus is, and that our salvation is in him, and where life is secure in him, no matter what. Colin,
look, time's out, I think. So we're going to have to call it a day, but I appreciate you coming on and taking a bit of time out of your day. We loved having you on here. Maybe we'll have you on again in a number of weeks' time. But thanks, Colin. We'll call it a day from there. Thanks.
David, thank you.